was in my early 20s and regrettably jobless. My shoulders were constantly burdened by the strain of being jobless and needing to make payments on my school loans, as well as rent for my on-campus apartment. I was a student majoring in the medical field, so it was always inevitable that the majority of my time was delegated to schoolwork and applying for jobs online. As I was living off the funds I made for my last retail job, the quality of my life at this time was both extremely stressful and depressing, as I would literally live off eating crackers and cheap instant noodle packs. I would even go as far as to sleep hungry sometimes just to save every last dollar possible to help pay for my rent and school funds. I remember staying up late one night as I had a biology exam coming up. Within a few days, I could recall being overwhelmed by the monotonous material I was drilling into my head when I heard a loud knock on my door. "Sarah? Sarah, can you answer the door? It's Charlie." "Hello? I know you're in there. I heard you watching TV 5 minutes ago." "Yes. What do you want, Charlie?" "I need to talk to you. Can you please answer the door?" "Hey, Sarah. You know your rent is due, right? I'll get it to you by tomorrow. I've just been a little flustered with the school." "Don't worry. You can give it to me tomorrow." "Thank you so much, Charlie. You're a lifesaver. I'll make it easier for you. I do take other forms of payment, you know." "I'm good. I'll just pay you tomorrow." "What's wrong, Sarah?" "I'm just trying to help a pretty little girl like you out. Don't you want my help?" "Don't worry. It'll only take 5 minutes, tops. We'll act like nothing ever happened. Imagine not having to worry about paying a single bill again, Sarah, for just a measly 5 minutes of your time. Did I ever tell you that you look just as beautiful as my daughter?" I said I'm good. "You better pay me tomorrow, you little brat, or else you could get the hell out of my property." I've always had unsettling vibes from my landlord the day I moved in here, but unfortunately couldn't really do much. The housing market for students around the area was either occupied or way over my budget. As busy as I was with school, I was always a social butterfly at heart and had a pretty decent following on my social media. I, unfortunately, didn't make any money online, but I did have about a couple hundred fans in my DMs and comments section asking if I had Onlyfans. I of course didn't own one, as I was always hesitant and encountering weirdos within the online world. I really didn't want to run into the risk of being recognized by any school colleagues or relatives for that matter. Considering the internet was a large place where anything could be shared or screen recorded nowadays. At the time that this occurred, I was extremely eager to make any form of income without having to deal with the hassle of working a regular job, which is why I ultimately decided to sign up for an OnlyFans account. I decided to take a couple of provocative selfies of myself while wearing some outfits that I thought would be appealing to the rather large male audience I had accumulated through my years on social media. I even went as far as to take self-portraits of myself in bed using a professional camera I had owned a while ago. I remember uploading the catalog of images on my profile, while promoting it on my Instagram story just to see if there were going to be any first-time buyers willing to see the other side of me. I made sure to hide the stories from my close relatives, especially my mother, as I didn't want them to know. I wanted to explore the mature side of myself and that I wasn't solely depending on making a living using OnlyFans. I can recall it not even being 5 minutes yet when I noticed a notification on OnlyFans. I then refreshed my homepage only to see that I got my first paid subscriber. If I had to be honest, I was quite thrilled at the notion that anyone would be interested in me. Or should I say my looks? I remember the user then sending a message saying, "Hey, beautiful, Happy to be your first OnlyFans sub. I typed, "Thank you. Let me know if you'd like to see more." The user then playfully requested several provocative pictures of me wearing lingerie. I felt a little uncomfortable hearing such a request, but I knew in the back of my head that this was going to take some getting used to, especially if I wanted to pursue a potential career on OnlyFans. Regardless of who this person was, as I decided to take the requested pictures in front of a mirror using my cell phone, I then uploaded the images onto my laptop and charged the man a lump sum of $50 per photo. The man then responded, "I want to be your one and only customer forever." I obviously found this a bit alarming, but casually brushed it off by telling the user I was going to go study and that I was going to catch him later. I then made my way to the kitchen to make some instant noodles while resuming the dreadful exam preparation I had procrastinated on since the beginning of the day. I remember studying for at least a good 2 hours straight before calling it a night. I then headed back to my bedroom only to notice my laptop was still open and wanted to see if there was any further activity with my OnlyFans account. That's what I saw. At least 100 unread messages came from the same user that I had interacted with earlier. The messages varied from things like "Where are you?" to "Hello. I've been waiting for you for hours now" to really aggressive messages like "Answer me, ho." This left me completely dumbfounded, as the user then seemed apologetic towards the end of the messages, as if he suffered from bipolar disorder. I honestly contemplated blocking this guy, but as I scrolled through the messages, I noticed one of them offering to pay me $100 if I sent a video of myself crying on camera. I couldn't tell if this guy was joking or if it was some sort of sick of his, but I decided to oblige as I really needed the money. I began to screen record a video of myself using my webcam and began to force myself to cry by thinking of sad things like the death of my grandmother or the divorce of my parents, and how my dad left my mom hanging to be a deadbeat dad. I eventually stopped the filming and sent the video to the user for a price tag of $100. About 5 seconds later, the user immediately sends another odd request, as if he disregarded my last video and was craving for more. The message read, "Can you stick your finger down your throat and vomit in a bucket? I'll pay you another $100. What the hell? What a freaking weirdo. This seemed extremely off-putting, but I felt as if I was obliged to do so, considering I was an extremely broke student and needed any kind of funds I could get my hands on. I decided to grab a large bowl from my kitchen cabinet while contemplating my conscious decision to do such a thing. As I sat in front of my laptop, I held the bowl with one hand and stuck my index finger down my throat with the other, while simultaneously trying to regurgitate the instant noodles I had just eaten. I then sent the user the video with a price tag of $100. Again, the user instantly replies in a matter of seconds with another odd request. His message read, "Cut a handful of your hair off using a knife and I'll pay you $200. I felt pretty hesitant at first, but as I digested the odd request, I thought it would be an easy $200, considering how I always wanted to get a haircut anyway. I responded with a stern sure bribe as I went into the kitchen to grab a knife from one of the kitchen drawers. As I stared into the reflection of the blade, I began second-guessing myself, as the thought of sadistically tearing my hair off with a blade seemed very inhumane. They, unfortunately, allowed my stupidity to completely overcloud my judgment, as I ended up biting on a piece of cloth while raising my hair with one hand, and then slowly cutting it off with a knife on my other hand. I remember trying my best not to make too much noise from my repugnant decisions, as the sheer distress from the back and forth carving of my hair left my scalp throbbing in an excruciating manner. I then shouted, "Here's your stupid video, you sick freak. Are you happy now? Ha. Ha." As I gestured a hand of my detached hair, That's when the user immediately responds with another sadistic request, saying, "Now cut your finger off for another $200. I immediately dismissed the user using profanities and vulgar language, basically telling him to go himself as I simultaneously blocked his account. I then went into the washroom and began to sit in the bathtub to reflect on my bizarre decisions and what possessed me to do such a thing. I could then hear my phone vibrating on the bathroom sink several times from the notifications set on my phone as I got out of the shower. I checked my phone only to see the notifications were from a user with the same profile name on Instagram. I could tell that the user was obviously a stalker as he had no followers, but was following at least a couple hundred others. I then opened the user's messages only to see screenshots and video footage of what transpired within our OnlyFans interaction. As I scrolled up, I noticed a lengthy message from the user asking me to bring a knife to an undisclosed location, if I didn't want him to send this to anyone else. Almost like I was getting taunted and blackmailed at the same time. I ended up accepting the user's messages and replying with a firm, "I'm going to sue you if you don't delete those images and videos." He then responds with an image of my mother's Instagram and says, "Is this your mom's Instagram?" I then reply with, "What? Don't do it. I'm begging you. Go to the park now." "Okay, fine. You win. I'm leaving right now, you freak." That's when I tucked the knife underneath the band of my leggings and began to walk toward the park. I then text the user for further instructions as I surveyed my surroundings of the park, only to see a homeless-looking individual laying on a bench. That's when I get another text from the user saying, "Since you didn't want to cut your finger off, cut him and I'll leave you alone." I then pulled out the knife and began to approach the homeless man. As I could see, he was completely passed out drunk from the empty alcohol bottle laying next to the bench he was sleeping on. As I cautiously approached the man, I began to elevate his pinky in midair with one hand while raising the knife with my other hand. I then swung the knife in one quick motion and fell. That's when I ran back towards the main road as the man screamed in agony. I eventually made it back to my place and began panting and distress and exhaustion, without making it obvious to the other individuals in the household that I had initially stepped out. I then abruptly got a call on my cell phone. I was a little hesitant to answer the phone, considering I had not given out any personal information to the user. As I pull out my phone, I can see that the call was surprisingly coming from my mom. I answered the phone and said, "Hello. What the hell is wrong with you, Sarah? Why would you do that? Why have you freaking lost your damn mind? You're all over the internet." I was stunned. I was 22 years old and was always despondent from the lack of job offers I was getting online. Not having the responsibility of a job drove me crazy for the latter part of my post-graduation time off. As the lack of response from the dozens of job applications I had applied for online were either being neglected, or probably in someone's spam box. I wanted to make a steady income, which would have allowed me to find a place with my boyfriend John, and possibly move in together. I also wanted to prove to my parents that I was something they could genuinely be proud of, but they, unfortunately, weren't the most supportive. As I got the move out of my place vibes every time we interacted with each other. My boyfriend John was the only person in my life that was supportive of me. I was supportive of him as well. As John went through a traumatic experience of dealing with his ex-girlfriend's death about a year or two ago. She apparently died from a brain tumor which left her in a coma for the latter part of their relationship. It was obviously a bitter pill for John to swallow, but through time, he eventually came to terms with the loss and found some closure along the way. There was a time when John recommended that I use OnlyFans if I wasn't able to snatch a job within the next few months, as it was a great source of income according to what his ex made off of it. I figured I'd give it a try as I thought it couldn't hurt to show off my looks in exchange for a couple of $100s. I remember taking a few self-portraits of myself while wearing the most seductive outfits I could find in my wardrobe. I then made an OnlyFans account and uploaded the images in hopes that I could capture the attention of any potential consumers from around the world. Several weeks later, my OnlyFans success had taken an unexpected turn as I grew a pretty large following and was able to make a decent amount of income to suffice myself. There was this one user who was usually consistent in requesting my content through my DMs. I could honestly say that he or she was the most active on my page considering they were requesting videos or photos almost every day. I felt as if I had established a strong rapport with this one individual as we chatted often, as I could in order to maintain a healthy relationship with that user. I began to feel slightly uncomfortable over time as the user began requesting weird things like a photo of myself, with my foot behind my back or replicating a murder scene in my bedroom using fake blood. I think it's hot when girls are covered in blood. It reminds me of my favorite movie, Gone Girl. What the hell? I found it weird that someone would get off on these kinds of things, but I and my boyfriend both mutually agreed to take the high road and go ahead with the requests. Considering the majority of my revenue was solely coming from this one particular person, as time went on, the request became more and more bizarre. The longer we stayed in contact, I remember the user requested if I could dye my hair black or start wearing more darker shades of makeup while taking photos. It honestly felt as if I was playing dress up for the number of demands the user was asking. One of the most bizarre requests was a daily video of myself running on a treadmill. It was almost as if I was getting paid to run, shower, and then take provocative photos each and every day in exchange for X amount of dollars. This occurred for a couple of months as I've lost close to 30 pounds from the constant treadmill fetish the user got off on. It was getting to the point where I felt like I was beginning to lose my identity. So I stopped using OnlyFans and just occupied myself by staying away from my laptop and spending more time with my boyfriend. I remember this one night. My boyfriend was in the shower while I was watching TV, when I decided to check my OnlyFans account just to see if that weirdo was still messaging me. I didn't have my laptop with me at the time, so I decided to use my boyfriend's laptop to log in. As I opened up the site, I realized that my boyfriend surprisingly had OnlyFans account that was already logged in. I then noticed he had the same username as the person that was messaging me throughout all of these months. That's when I closed the tab and unexpectedly saw a picture of John with his ex-girlfriend on his desktop wallpaper. As I surveyed the portrait scattered around his room, I then realized that my boyfriend wasn't supporting my OnlyFans because he cared about me. He was doing it because he wanted me to look exactly like his dead ex-girlfriend. The story creeps me out just thinking about it. I find it disturbing and just downright wrong on so many levels. It happened about a year ago when I was up late one night watching TV in my bedroom. I was feeling a bit lonely and decided to be a little snoopy as I lacked any female companionship due to quarantining for months, since the global pandemic. I obviously couldn't go out and meet girls like I used to, so I decided to resort to apps such as Tinder or Bumble. I, unfortunately, got tired of using such apps over time as the rules of quarantining defeated the purpose of potentially meeting someone in person anyway. The lack of social interaction and inability to date was starting to get to me, which is why I decided to start entertaining the idea of using OnlyFans. I've seen my friends use OnlyFans in the past, so exploring such content wasn't a foreign thing to me. The time was roughly 1 a.m. when I decided to go on Instagram and scope out any random model that I thought would be worth spending a few $100s on. I remember coming across this one girl named Ava. She was petite and brunette and of course had an attractive face, which was qualities I valued a lot when looking at a female at first glance. I decided to check out her OnlyFans from her Instagram bio and committed to subscribing to her page just so I could see more exclusive content and hopefully make up for the lackluster night I was having. I obviously had to punch in my credit card details but was definitely not ashamed to do such a thing, as Ava's content looks pretty promising. That's when I decided to shoot her a message and perhaps request more raunchy and seductive photos. I figured it couldn't hurt to shoot my shot. Ava surprisingly responded with stuff like, "Hey, there, but you're looking for some fun. What can I do for you, babe?" I ended up responding with, "Can you send me some hot pics to help make me not feel lonely?" About 2 minutes later, Ava sent me a photo with an unlock for $50. I felt a little nervous but decided to go ahead with the purchase only to see what I had anticipated. Her exquisite face, in conjunction with her curvy and petite body, left me thirsty and wanting more. Over the next hour or so, I spent approximately $300 on photos and video clips of Ava through the interactions we had through our DMS. Let's just say I ended up sleeping pretty well that night and definitely got my money's worth. The next morning I decided to Google search more about Ava just to see if I could potentially find more content about her online, without having to pay for more on her OnlyFans. That's when things took a darker turn and it completely changed the whole complexion of the story. I remember seeing an obituary of Ava as one of the first links on the Google search feed. I decided to click it and see if the obituary was legitimate. After reading the obituary further, it was apparent that Ava had tragically passed away several weeks ago due to undisclosed reasons. A million questions started racing through my head as I started to wonder who the hell was I talking to, and how could she send me all of these photos and videos of herself as she was supposedly dead? As I dug a little deeper on Google, I found several articles stating that her own mother had been selling photos and videos of her deceased daughter to gain profit from her. I remember getting so many goosebumps to the point where I legitimately thought I was going to throw up all over my computer desk. I've since never used OnlyFans, as the thought of talking to a stranger who is deceased but has their account run by another individual freaks me out just thinking about it. Either way, the story is downright terrifying. As I pray, the mom seeks professional help and hopefully finds some closure in the passing of her daughter. This all took place in my home country of Brazil. My buddy had a friend called Antonio. I never met the guy personally, but everyone who had told me he was a really funny guy. And like most funny guys who are at least a little bit handsome, he was very popular with the ladies. One day, Antonio told my buddy that he had organized a date with a model. "A model?" said my friend. "You're serious? Is anyone I've heard of?" "Maybe," said Antonio, who handed his phone over to my friend. Open on the screen was an OnlyFans page. The girl whose page it was didn't have that many images or videos uploaded, so it was obvious her page was pretty new, but my friend did recognize her immediately. She was a local woman called Isabella Young and absolutely gorgeous, one of the best-looking girls he had ever laid his eyes on. In his words, she had a booty like an onion. He'd make a grown man cry. Antonio had met her in our small town and asked her for her contact information. Instead, she took his phone and opened up her OnlyFans page. From there, he became a follower. He sent her a DM and asked her out on a date, and she said no at first. But Antonio was persistent and kept asking rather than replying using words. She sent back an image that was hidden behind a paywall, the equivalent of about $50. Antonio was a pretty wealthy young man, so curious as he was. He paid the money and opened the message without a second thought, hoping for a raunchy picture. The image was just text, a time, and a dress for their date. It also said to bring money to pay for dinner. As I said, my friend knew who Isabella was and knew that she already had a boyfriend. A mean Villa de Mai called Dobby. Dobby rolled with some really bad dudes, was into some shady shears, and you could tell just by looking at the guy that you wouldn't want to mess with him. My buddy warned Antonio to be careful to cut contact with Isabella and not to go on this date with her. Antonio didn't listen since Isabella told him that she was single and that she and this guy must have broken up. That evening, Antonio got dressed up and drove off on his moped to meet Isabella. Now, my friend, being a man of culture, was, of course, a little bit curious about Isabella's online uploads. He decided to sign up on the site and became a follower of hers himself, and it was only cheap to do so. The equivalent of a couple of bucks a month. Well, there weren't many pictures and videos to look through, but Isabella was clearly focusing on quality over quantity. And my friend wasn't disappointed with what he saw. He logged off around 11 p.m. and went to bed. That next morning, my friend sent Antonio a message asking him how things went with Isabella. No reply. Antonio usually replied to his messages really quickly. Maybe things had gone well after all, and he was still with her. He waited until the afternoon. Still no reply. Not that unusual for Antonio. Maybe he was just getting a little afternoon delight. No. The days passed and there was still no word from Antonio. My friend checked in with everyone who knew him, including his boss at work. Nobody had seen him since that night. People were starting to get worried. The authorities seemed to have little interest in helping find him, saying that Antonio was a grown man and had probably gone off traveling or something by himself since his moped was never found. Isabella continued posting on her account as normal, and since my friend was still following her, he decided to send her a DM asking if she knew where Antonio was. If so, was he all right? Instead of text, she sent back an image that he could unlock for $50. No words, just an image hidden behind a paywall. My friend didn't have a lot of money, but something told him he had to open it. He paid the money and opened the picture. It was a photo of a dirty shovel close-up. The hand gripping it was obviously male. Behind it, he could make out a hole in the earth large enough to fit a human inside. It was captioned, "What do you think?" My friend didn't want to believe it, but in his heart, he knew what had happened and he knew he had never seen Antonio again. He tried desperately to get Isabella to reply to him via DM, but that was the last he ever heard from her too. She continued uploading content to her account, but both she and Avi left town shortly after Antonio vanished. Surely not a coincidence. It seemed like both of them were in on this together after all. So what happened that fateful night? Scenario 1: Davi was using Isabella and forcing her to post images of herself online so he could make a little money. She was the face, and he was the one behind the messages and lured Antonio into a trap. Scenario 2: Davy didn't know that Isabella was using the site, and when he learned that she was actually going on a date with someone, he flipped. Maybe Isabella, realizing that Antonio dressed well and must have had some money in his pocket, targeted him specifically. Maybe they held him up and he decided to fight back. Maybe they planned to do away with him from the beginning and take whatever money he brought into his pockets. Sadly, the investigators did very little to help. Davy had ties to the fuzz, so it's possible they intentionally brushed everything under the rug and told him and Isabella to skip down. Several months came and went with neither Davi nor Isabella being seen around town at all. My friend continued to keep an eye on her page, hoping that a new clue would come to light. He thought that would be the end of it. Then one night he received a notification saying Isabella had uploaded a new photo. He logged in to check what it was. It was an image sent to all of her followers titled "My Final Post." He opened it. It was a blurry picture of Isabella in a dark, wooded area. Her eye was black, her face cut, and she looked absolutely terrified, her hands up near her face as if she was trying to protect herself. There was no caption to explain the image. Both the picture and her account were deleted shortly afterward. Davy hasn't returned to our town since. And for our sake, I hope he never does.